Hello, welcome back to part 2 of my junior stripping video. Part 1's on my channel. This is the second part where we're now inside the motor and we're going to be stripping the motor down. So I'm going to pull the camera down here and so we can focus in on the motor itself. So what I'm going to be doing first is I'm going to be removing the bearings from the motor, which is going to be this end one here. So we're going to undo these 2 screws first. Now usually on the other side there is a little nut as well, so depending on some models it might actually drop off the back here. It looks like this one it's going to. We can just remove that screw, and then what will happen is the little nut will drop off the back like that. Put that out of the way, and then we're going to take off the one on the other side here. Okay, remembering the one goes in one way round and the other goes in the other way round. Okay, so that'll enable us now to remove the rear bearing. Right, now there we see the rear bearing. Now I'm going to do the same with the front bearing. So we'll move it back here. We're going to remove that screw and that screw. One, two, and that will enable us to remove the bearing retainer. Right, at this stage we can just remove the little rubber seal, and there we can see, just remove that off there. Let's see if I can pull this camera up slightly. There we go. Just remove the little rubber seal off there, and now what we need to do is we need to just take out the other carbon brush from the other side of the motor, which is just inside here. So I should need my other screwdriver. Okie dokie, and there it comes. And then I'm going to just refit that back on, because these are so easily lost, these tiny little screws. And just because I'm doing it on camera now, it's causing me being awkward. Come on, get in that hole. There we go. It's going in. Thank you. Right. So now what we can do is we can remove the armature together with the field coil. Lift up both, like so, and they will come out of the motor housing. And we can drop those back down. And there's the other half of the motor there. So that's what we've got now. Okay. So, at this point, I can remove the armature out of the field coil, and what we've got then is the rear bearing there, and there's the armature and there is the front bearing. Okay, there, and there's your commutator. So that now will enable us to be able to apply some oil or some grease into this rear bearing, and we can do the same into the front bearing as well. Notice they are both what looks to me to be, no, this one's a ball bearing, this front one is, and the rear one's a sleeve bearing. Yeah, that's actually spinning quite nicely in there. Yeah, it is. So what we're going to do, we're going to put some oil on this front one here. And just slip it into the gap around the edge. This basically in this oil can is actually engine oil, but you can use 3-in-1. It's probably better to use 3-in-1 oil to be honest. It's a little bit thinner than this. But if this oil lubricates car engines and bearings, I mean, it's going to be good enough to lubricate the bearings in here. But there's not a lot you can do if the bearings are worn. If they're worn, no amount of oil is going to help. So the idea is that you try and do this as a preventative measure rather than one that's going to, you know, trying to rescue a motor bearing that is knackered. Is just not going to work. We'll put a little bit of oil in the rear bearing. There we go. That's it. So, you know, essentially that is that's oiled our bearings now. We seem to be losing a lot of oil out of this oil can here. It's leaking a bit. I must have to get a paper towel. I'll just dry my oil can back off. It's leaked on the washing machine front. Right, there we go. So now what we're going to have to do is to put it all back together again. What you'd normally find when you open one of these motors up is that it would be extremely dusty inside here. So what you'd aim to do really is to hoover it out, to actually vacuum it out and make it nice and clean. But because I've had this motor to pieces before, it's pretty clean anyway, so I'm not going to need to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to now reassemble the motor. I mean, it's a little bit more involved to split one of these down than it is for a senior motor, so we'll just check the outside of here for wear and damage, and that's absolutely fine. That is. There's the front bearing. It's nice and smooth. There's no pitting or anything in there, so that's absolutely brilliant. So we'll slip the front bearing back on. And we will slip the back bearing back on. Right, make sure you can see, yes, the camera is... I have to keep checking the camera all the time to make sure I haven't moved it out of shot. Right. So we can insert our armature back into the field housing. Or have I got this right, or have I got this wrong now? Have I got that the right way around? No, I don't think it went on that way, did it? No, it definitely went on this way around. But did it fit inside here? I can't remember now. How did I take this to pieces now? think that's how it went. I've done this wrong, haven't I? What have I done wrong here? Those are screws for the housing there. I've put it in upside down, haven't I? I've done this that many times before, and now because I'm filming this on camera, I've got myself a bit confused now. But that's... that's supposed to go through there. The field coil... no, it doesn't fit in that way, it goes in this way. Or does it go in? Yes, that's right, yeah. Dear oh dear oh dear. Am I like? That goes back inside here. Yeah, that's it. I put it back in the wrong side first, hadn't I? That's supposed to go on there like that. That then goes back together on that half. You just have to excuse me for a second here because I'm trying to work this out myself. I still feel that something isn't quite right on this. Because it's not going back together properly. It's this rear bearing that there's a specific way. Yes, that's it. That's it. What we've got is we've got a cutout, a sort of a flattened spot on this rear bearing here, and that has to go down here into there so that the bearing will go all the way down into the bottom. I felt it wasn't right because this field coil wasn't sitting in the motor correctly. That's how we do it. It's this rear bearing has got a sort of a flat spot which has to go down into that housing in the correct way. There we go. We've got it. Got there in the end. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the front mounting back on, which is this. It's difficult here trying to get everything on this camera. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so that's the front bearing retainer put on, and then I'm going to put this rubber gasket back on. And I've got to remember now which way around it went. That's it. That just fits down into that little recess there. There we go. Right, now we can put the rear bearing retainer on, which goes on here. remembering that one side went in from the bottom and the other side from the top. So if we put the side that goes in from the bottom first, like that, and screw that in. And then the other side that went in from the top. Put the nut on the bottom here. Okay, and then we can tighten that up. Making sure it's nice and tight because we don't want that coming loose. There we go, and that's spinning nicely inside there. So now we're going to put the other half back on. I think we've just about got everything back in there. Flip it over, like so. And now we find it's being difficult again. What is it that's stopping it this time? It looks like it's this screw here. Yeah, so I'm going to remove that screw from the carbon brush housing. And that should enable it to go back together, not forgetting to, you've got a lug on the top of here and one on the top of there, so that has to go back into these two holes. There's a hole on the top there and a hole in the bottom, so that has to go back into there before you can close the two halves of the motor back together like so. Okay, so now we've got the two halves back together. I'm going to put the screws back in. So we'll have the two front screws first. I'm now off the camera, aren't I? This is very, very tricky to do on the camera. I can get the camera close enough because I haven't got a very good tripod. We're going to try and get one screw there and one screw back in there, basically. That's one. The rate I'm going here, we're going to need a part 3. A bit more involved than a senior motor, I'll say that much. That's one. Tighten that down fully. 2. And then we've got one at the back in that hole there, and that's the one with the nut on the other side. Okay, so we just push that nut back into that hexagonal hole, hold your finger on the nut, and that will enable us to get the screw back in. We use a bigger screwdriver. There we go. So that's all done up, and that's done up as well. And then I think, if I remember rightly, that we've got to put this back on here as well. There's those two holes where the old suppressor and mountings went on, so we're going to have to just screw those back in. Screw the housing back in, but without the suppressor inside it. 1, 2. They're important that they go back in because they actually secure the field housing inside. I think that's the way around it went, wasn't it? We'll soon find out because it won't go back in the machine otherwise. Yes, I think it was. I think it did go in that way around. Right, so what we're going to do now, I'm just going to put the camera back up on the top. Just adjust the tripod there. And if I can just zoom it in slightly. There we go. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the carbon brushes back into their housings. Let's just have a looky here, where are we? Yeah, so that's the top one. We haven't got the screw in there at the moment, so we're going to have to put the carbon brush back in. Was that the way around it went? Yes, and then we want to put the little the black wire on top of there, and then put the screw in. So this is your neutral carbon brush, basically, that goes to the neutral. Where's that screwdriver? There we go. Oh, they're so fiddly, these. Come on, go in. It's going in, there we go. That's it, that's good. And then the one on the other side. Oh, you're joking. Oh, bugger it. I'm going to have to take all this back to pieces again to get to that now. Oh, sugar. Going to have to take it all back to pieces again. I can't get to that carbon brush because the casing's actually hidden the top of the screw, so I can't get to the screw to get that carbon back in. I should have put that in before. So now, you know, from the mistakes that I'm making here, that not to go and make them yourself, so I'm going to have to take all this back to pieces again. And I know Hoover has done this a few times himself, got to a stage there and then thought, oh no, I've got to take it all back to bits again now to get that back in. Bugger you. I'm afraid I have to make this an adult only one, I think, because I've just sworn in there and I can't have children watching that. No other way of getting to that, is there, without having to completely take that case off? Oh. There we go, you see the other little screw is accessible just from inside there like that. Right, we're running out of time on this now, so I'm going to have to have a part 3, so I'll